Hello everyone and welcome to day number 50 of your daily Chofetz Chaim. Today we continue with the fifth chapter of the laws of Lashon Hara. And the Chofetz Chaim writes in halacha number 5. Now we will continue to discuss that which we were discussing earlier, which was talking about a lack of something positive that somebody has. And one of the things we mentioned was strength. That means, the Chofetz Chaim says, to say about somebody that they are naturally a weak constituted person, a bit frail perhaps, and this depends on that person's occupation. If they can come to some sort of harm because of this, for example, if they are a hired worker or a teacher, something which requires a strong constitution in order to be the most effective, then if this information gets out, then that can certainly be detrimental to this person's income, and that would be Lashon Hara. And the third thing we mentioned was when it comes to wealth, to say that somebody is a poor person, or perhaps that he's not as wealthy as people think he is, and that the things that he has he doesn't really own. It's on borrowed money, and he owes other people money, etc. This is also considered to be Lashon Hara because it will, if this information were to get out, that will certainly be detrimental to him. He will not be able to find people to do business with. He will not be able to get loans, credit, etc. And that can certainly affect his income in a very detrimental way. And therefore, people who care about other people need to think very carefully before they say things if they don't have a specific positive intention in what they're saying with a particular outcome in mind that will be beneficial. Then they have to be very careful that they should never say anything that can come to some sort of loss to the person that is being spoken about. Now, if he does have a specific reason that he feels that this needs to be said, and there is a positive outcome that will come from it, then those laws will be discussed later on in due time. And it's very easy to just jump to a conclusion and say, oh, well, yeah, there's a positive outcome from this. There are a lot of details, a lot of rules, and all of them need to be taken into consideration, as will be explained later on. And then halacha number 6, the Chofetz Chaim continues and says that there is another very straightforward rule about the laws of Lashon Hara, and that is that it really depends about whom you are talking. Meaning that you can say the same thing about two different people, and while for one of them it will be a compliment, for someone else that could be an insult and would be then Lashon Hara. For example, if you say about someone who is being supported by others that he learns Torah for 3 or 4 hours a day. So for someone like that, that would be a terrible disgrace. He's being supported to spend his whole day learning. To say that he only spends 3 or 4 hours a day, that would certainly be Lashon Hara. However, if you were to say about somebody who works a full-time job, and yet they still somehow find a way to fit 3 or 4 hours of Torah learning into their day, then that would certainly be a tremendous compliment, and that would not be Lashon Hara. And the same would be true of any kind of mitzvah that is monetary. So, for example, honoring Shabbos. If you say that someone gives or spends X amount of dollars on food for Shabbos, then if you're dealing with somebody who is not particularly wealthy, then that could be a tremendous compliment. But if you say that same dollar amount about someone who is very affluent, and you say that's what they spend on Shabbos, that would be disgraceful. For someone like that, they would certainly not appreciate that information being spread, that they spend so little. And the same would be true about tzedakah. If you say, again, a dollar amount, and you say, well, they gave X amount to the following charity, that would be very complimentary for one person, but for someone else that would be very derogatory, and therefore it would all depend on the person that you are talking about and the situation that it is. Also, if you talk about the way someone treats his employees or his workers or people who work for him, whatever it may be, so if it's a regular person and this is a standard business process, this is the way people do things in the standard practice, in a business, then that wouldn't be derogatory. But if you say the same thing about someone who is considered a Talmid Chacham, a rabbi, a great person, you say that that's how they treat their workers, that would not be appropriate for that person, and therefore would be considered Lashon Hara to say that same thing about the great rabbi. And the Chofetz Chaim says, obviously, it's difficult to go through all of the different scenarios, but just take the rule of the Rambam and always remember it, and that is that anything that if it were to become known by others, that can possibly lead to any kind of pain or loss, whether it's physical or financial or emotional, or even to make him afraid, anything like that, any kind of damage that can come to the other person, if it were to spread, is always considered to be Lashon Hara. And the Chavetz Chaim warns at the end, he says, don't allow your Yetzer Hara to get to you and say, well, the rule of thumb is that don't do to someone else what you wouldn't want done to yourself. And then say, well, I would love it if people said about me that I learn for 3 or 4 hours a day. I don't, but it would be nice if people said that about me, so I don't have to love my neighbor any more than I love myself. And if they said that about me, that'd be great. So what's wrong with saying it about them? So the Chavetz Chaim says obviously that is not accurate, and the same would not be true, or the same, would be true that this is not accurate of the financial matters of tzedakah and honoring Shabbos, etc., all of those things, because the rule of thumb that you shouldn't do what you wouldn't want done to yourself is if you were in that person's same situation as far as all of the different factors that are involved. And therefore, since it is so subjective, you would have to be in their position and then be able to say, I wish they would say that about me, in order for that to not be considered Lashon Hara.